Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. It has been very hot and very smoky here, and that has really limited my time out in the garden. But this morning it's cooler and the air quality is much better, so I thought I'd quickly shoot a tour of our vegetable garden. I typically do this once a month, so this is the July vegetable garden tour. And what I'll do is I'll go from bed to bed so you can see what's growing, and I'll share some tips and any kind of little interesting things along the way. So let's get started. So here's the first bed in the first row, and it happens to be in the northwest corner of our garden. The reason that's significant is because that is in an area that plants tend to struggle in, mostly because there's a lot of shade here. And so what happened is my kale, which had been growing pretty well, decided to bolt to seed. So I've taken out the plants. And we are actually considering having one pine tree taken down to try to remedy the problem with the sunlight. It's just along the northern part of our garden, but it is frustrating and we like to use as many beds as possible. So that's the status of that bed. Nothing exciting to show you. So next up is our carrot and parsnip bed. Both of them are root crops, and there's 3 rows of carrots. They're growing really well, and so are the parsnips. If you take a peek, you can see the tops of some carrots, and I can tell the roots are really developing nicely. So this bed is almost into the full sunlight, and this is where I'm growing zucchini. The variety is gray, and I know that sounds very unappetizing. It's probably named after somebody who developed it, but this has been such a productive zucchini, and it's one that develops so quickly. It's great to use as a succession crop in your garden. This is the variety that I like to grow for donating to our local food bank. So let me show you a couple of zucchinis because they're really interesting. So here's one. You can see they're chunky little guys. They are so fast growing. And here's the other one. And both of those are ready to pick. So let me just show you one of them. But they are so incredibly prolific and very quick to ripen. There's one other thing I wanted to mention. On this zucchini plant, you might think it looks like there's powdery mildew forming on the leaves. Actually, this is the natural coloration for this variety. It is not powdery mildew, but it certainly can freak you out the first time you grow it. Do you remember that Bill and I are having a potato growing contest? So this part of the bed is Bill's, and this part of the bed is mine. And the quick story behind it is that we saw an article in Mother Earth News about different ways of growing potatoes and which methods were the most productive. And one of the things it said is that if you plant potatoes in straw rather than down in the soil, and then just keep filling around the plants with the straw, they're much easier to harvest. And when I heard about that, I thought, I don't know if that would work or not. I'm kind of doubtful about it. And so what we decided to do was have this competition. And so mine are being grown the traditional way, where you plant the seed potato in the soil, and then as it grows, you keep filling in soil around it. And I don't know, I think my part of the bed looks better. Of course I would say that, right? We are really up in the air as far as who's going to win the competition, and I'm going to definitely let you know as we get to harvest time. But these still need to grow for a while, and I don't know, I think these look pretty good. So this is our lettuce bed, and I have something really interesting to share with you. So first of all, it's growing under agricultural insect netting. It's not to keep insects away, but it's for 2 important purposes as far as I'm concerned. First of all, we have a lot of quail, which are beautiful birds, that love to nibble on lettuce leaves. So that's one of the reasons for this barrier. The other reason for this cover is because I make a lot of salads, and so I'm always getting into this bed. So we decided to cover the lettuce bed with a hinged row cover. And that's because if I had used a regular floating row cover and put it on hoops on the bed and then weighed down the outer perimeter with blocks or bricks or something, then it's just a pain in the neck. So this way, all I have to do is lift the cover and I can harvest. Now, second interesting thing I want to show you. You're probably looking at these going, those lettuce plants have gone to seed. Why hasn't she cleaned those up? Let me tell you. So this is the craziest thing. I'm growing mesclun lettuce. It's been planted since early this spring. It's been producing well. It started bolting to seed, which means sending up a flower stalk, blooming on the top, setting seed, and dying. That's what it normally would do this time of year when it gets warm. But in all the years I've been growing lettuce, I've never had this happen. The leaves have not turned bitter. And that's one of the things that always happens when lettuce bolts to seed. These make the best salads. So I heartily recommend trying them because I am so amazed that they are not bitter. So yeah, the bed looks horrible, but we're still getting to have lovely salads. In this next bed, I'm using a row cover, and that is because of an insect problem. So in this bed, I'm growing beets and, in theory, Swiss chard. Both of them are members of the beet family, along with spinach, and they are very susceptible to leaf miner damage. So that's why I've got the hinged row cover over it. So now let me show you how things are doing and why I said in theory I was growing Swiss chard. You see that blank area on the right end of the bed? That is where my Swiss chard is supposed to be growing. I have planted it and re-sowed the seeds and re-sowed the seeds, and they just do not want to grow this year. I thought maybe my seeds were old. They're not. I thought maybe it wasn't getting enough water, but actually it is. So I guess for some reason I don't get to grow Swiss chard this year. But I might plant it as a succession crop later. So here is the beet section of the bed. And you can see this is a Detroit dark red beet growing. Got another one over here and there, but some gaps. And then back here I have golden beets growing. So it's just kind of a frustrating thing, but you know, it happens. Now let's take a look at the broccoli bed. And you'll notice I've got some shade cloth over it, but I pinned it up higher on this side to allow for some extra air circulation so the plants wouldn't get too warm. But I'm trying to protect them from the intensity of the sun. So this bed of Bellstar broccoli is covered with agricultural insect netting, and that is to keep the cabbage worms and aphids away, and it does so very successfully. So I'll take this cover off so you can see how the plants are doing. Here we are. You can see the plants are looking great. There's no insect damage on them whatsoever. I've already harvested the large heads, and I blanched them and froze them so that we can enjoy them later. And I have one that hasn't produced its main head yet, but it's getting close. And so when I do take this cover off, I just check on the plants, make sure there aren't any leaves that are touching the ground, which I'll explain in a moment. Make sure there aren't any kind of problems. If you look closely at the base of this plant, you can see there's a copper ring on here. That is at the base of every broccoli plant in this bed, and it is to keep slugs from getting up into the plants and causing a whole lot of damage. So this copper barrier works great because the antenna of slugs react electrically. They get basically like a shock, so they want nothing to do with the plants. So what I do is I make sure there aren't any leaves that are down touching on the ground, because then that would be an alternative way for the slugs to get up into the plants, and it keeps them away from the copper barriers. So that's one thing I always check while I have the cover off. You know, you probably noticed that I didn't lift this up like a hinged row cover that I've been showing you on the last two beds. That's because there isn't one on this bed. These are actually quite tall hoops because the plants grow so large and so tall that I needed something higher to protect them. Okay, now we're at the start of the second row of raised beds in our garden, and you're looking at our small hoop house. And it looks different this time around if you saw the June garden tour, because now it's covered with some heavy-duty frost blanket material, definitely not to keep the plants warm, but to cool them off a little bit, because it can get pretty warm in there even though we have both doors open on the hoop house. So this is where Bill's growing peppers. Let's take a look at them. So Bill really enjoys growing peppers in here, although this year he's growing fewer plants than usual, so it doesn't look quite as dense in here. But if you take a look in the left bed, there's some different peppers along with extra onions he planted. And they do have peppers on them, so they're coming along. But they did get off to kind of a rough start. And then on the right-hand side, here are more peppers along with more onions. Now it's time for Bill's bed of grape tomatoes. The variety is Pandarino, and if you're looking for a fabulous variety for making fresh salsa, this is the one. And the cool thing is you can see some ripening down here and here and here and over here. So pretty soon we'll be able to harvest them. Now you can see them a little bit better. And there are a gazillion green tomatoes on here, so we're going to have a huge harvest. No complaints here. Now on the south side of the bed, you can see a ton of onions. Bill always starts all sorts of them and then likes to poke them here and there so that we can get double duty out of our beds. These are different types of onions and shallots, and whenever we need something, we just come out and yank out a few and put them in whatever we're making. You might recall that in this next bed I had the pea crop growing, and boy did the plants go nuts. So we got a great harvest off of them, and we decided to sow a succession crop of corn. This is Sweetness Bicolor. You'll be seeing more of that in a moment. And I wanted to let you know that next week the topic for my video is succession planting. That is a way to get way more produce out of your garden. It's easy and totally worth it. So here's another bed of Sweetness Bicolor corn. Now this one was planted way earlier than the ones I just showed you, and they are already tasseling, and I am so excited because it's a quickly maturing variety, takes 68 days, and the corn is absolutely delicious. So you can tell this is way ahead of the other ones I just showed you. In this next bed, I'm growing Zephyr Summer Squash. This is one that's two-toned. It's a pale yellow with green tips. So they're beautiful squash, but they also have a fabulous flavor. I just harvested a bunch off of them, but let's see if I can find one so you can see what I'm talking about. Here's one that's still a baby, but look at how pretty that is. In this last raised bed, I'm growing New England pie pumpkins, and you can see I've got a nice one going here. There's a little baby one here. There's a larger one over there and some other little babies, but they're coming along very nicely. Right next to that bed, we've got 6 containers that we're growing onions, shallots, and peppers in. They are connected via drip irrigation, so they get watered on a regular basis, and they are doing great. Now we're in the third row. And the first bed just has a few onions in it, and that's it. So I thought I'd just jump right to our bean arbor. This is where I'm growing Monte Gusto yellow pole beans and Vortex pole beans. And this works so slick. I've been doing this for years, actually since 2008. I found 4 little arbors or trellises at the Kroger's Garden Center. They were on sale for 50% off at the beginning of the growing season. I couldn't believe my luck. So I bought 4. They're each spaced a few inches apart. And this is a great way to grow beans, especially since I get to stand in the shade as the vines fill in more to pick the beans. So that's pretty cool. But they are doing great. I've gotten 2 harvests of the Monte Gusto beans already, and the first harvest yesterday of the Vortex pole beans. And one of the things I wanted to mention is the difference between bush beans and pole beans regarding harvests, because it's obvious they're small plants compared to these, which grow about 7 feet long. But the thing with the harvest that I love about pole beans is you will get them all the way until the frosts come. With the bush beans, they typically produce for about 4, maybe 5 weeks, and then that's it. So that's why I like pole beans so much. And you know, if you don't have room in your veggie garden, but you've got a little arbor somewhere or a little trellis of some sort, plant a few seeds and grow them that way. I also wanted to mention that I've got a staggered row of celery plants growing here on the south side of the arbor. And the reason I emphasize that is because in the past, I've always grown celery on the north side of the arbor, thinking maybe it needed a little bit of shade. But they always seemed kind of like they were struggling, so I decided to do the south side, and they are doing great. It's so handy to grow your own celery plants because you can just harvest a stalk at a time as you need them, rather than when you buy a whole bundle of them at the grocery store and use a little, forget about them in the fridge, and they turn to mush. So fresh celery whenever you want it. This is our bed of Supremo tomatoes, and it is a determinate variety. You can see it doesn't get very tall, although they do seem slightly shorter this year for some reason. But what I love about them is that because they're determinants, they'll ripen the majority of the tomatoes at the same time, which is ideal for doing a canning project. I love using this to make homemade tomato sauce, salsa, and ketchup. It is just fabulous. The plants are doing great, no insect issues, and I'm just watching them grow. Here's a close-up of some of them just so you can see what they look like. You'll also notice on the south side of where the Supremo tomatoes are growing, we've got a couple things going on. One is clusters of onions that Bill planted there because he started so many from seed. And right at the center of the bed is a basil plant. And oh boy, does that smell good. Now this bed is where the garlic grew. And when we harvested it, we had already started some corn from seed indoors. And so we quickly replanted the bed with corn. That's the sweetness bicolor variety that we love so much, and the plants are doing great. And again, a reminder to tune in to next week's video, which is going to be about succession planting. Here's our squash arbor, which is made from 2 cattle panels. And what's on this side is autumn frost winter squash, and it is doing fabulously. Now I have been assisting it in moving up and over the arbor because I love the idea of having that all covered and having some shade underneath. But you can see all sorts of flowers are blooming. Those are female flowers, and I've been seeing bees buzzing around pollinating them, which is great. Here's one of the young squash. How cool is that? Now on the other side of the arbor, I've got some cucumbers growing, and they're climbing the arbor great. But I have to share a goof that I made with you because I consider you all my dearest friends. And I want you to know that things don't always go according to plan. So the other winter squash that I planted on the squash arbor is the shorter season butternut squash. I love this variety, and so I planted it, and I thought, why is it taking so long to climb when the autumn frost is doing so great? So I was talking with Bill about it, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, for Pete's sake, the full name of this butternut squash is Burpee's Butter Bush butternut squash, bush being the operative word. So this one should have gone where I planted the pumpkins, because it obviously does not need any kind of support and it is not inclined to grow up. And the pumpkins would grow up the arbors, but it's so funny how you just get a name of something in your head, but you don't take it apart. So I will say the plants are growing great, but they're pretty much going to stay down on this level. Whoops. On the south side of the arbor, we also have 5 big pots that we're growing either tomatoes or peppers in, and they're also connected to the drip line that is on that raised bed that it's next to. So let me show you how they're doing. The first pot has some pepper plants of Bill's growing in there, and I'm embarrassed to say I cannot recall for the life of